Welcome to the Alphagenix podcast, where every week we speak to incredible people from the world of health, well-being, longevity, biohacking, and of course, men's health. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Estrelita van Rensburg, a virologist and nutritionist, originally started over in South Africa and now not too far away from me in Scotland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ross. It's really a delight to be here and to talk to you.
Thank you very much. It'll be great to dive into your background, your history. Where did you get to where you are today? And I think you've co-authored as well 3 books, along with co-founding a healthcare business now called Wellness EQ.
Yes, correct. Well, I'll try to keep it short and punchy. So I studied medicine in South Africa, and I specialized in the division of pathology, but specifically in virology. And for many years, I stayed in academic medicine, did a lot of teaching, and also involved in research. And at the time, it was really the big expansion of the HIV epidemic in South Africa. And we got involved in developing HIV vaccines. And we did global collaborations on that. So it was really, in the forefront of science at the time, very exciting and a really very interesting time for me. But after about a decade and a half, I thought that, I want to do something different. I wanted to move out of academia. And I got a position in the pharmaceutical industry that brought me over here to the UK. So it was really quite an intense position. It was very stressful, I can say. And, when one gets to round about your 40s and so on, health may start to throw a few balls at you, and that's when I realized that maybe my health is not as invincible as I once thought it was. Anyway, it was a steep learning curve for me. I enjoyed traveling around the world. And but then I realized that there's something else that I need to do. And it was really from going from a pharmaceutical industry where it's all treatment based and so on. There must be something else that we can do, to improve our general health. And we can talk a bit about that, what's happening in the world health-wise these days. And that's when I started studying nutrition. And I thought, you may know that nutrition is not a subject that's really taught in medical school. Doctors are not interested. And I was no different from any of my colleagues. I thought it was going to be a quick bit of read up, and then I can move to more interesting things. Well, how wrong can you be? Because that's exactly where I got stuck. And I realized that what we've been taught and what's out there is actually not the truth about nutrition. And that was when my business partner and I, Izzy Warwick, started experimenting with nutrition itself. And what we discovered made us so passionate about it that we developed something that we want to share with other people and actually just move this message forward. But it's a very positive and hopeful message, and we can chat about that as well.
Amazing. Yeah. So what did you find? What was this thing that you discovered and you want to share with the world?
Well, I think that, the kind of misinformation that's out there, first of all, in the medical profession itself, but also for the general public, because it's based on nutrition, it is what is healthy to eat. And, there was a BBC program about processed food, I think last week, which was really interesting. And that's really at the basis of it. Where did this come from? Why are governments prescribing to the population what to eat? We're going back to the 20th century and after the Second World War, when there was a big interest in, really after the Second World War, in heart disease. Why are so many men and women dying from heart attacks? And that led to a lot of funding and research. And actually, what was blamed was, and I think most people know that it's fat and cholesterol that we eat, and that gives us a heart attack. Well, it's not the truth, and it was never substantiated by scientific evidence. But it protects a whole industry that was rapidly developing in the 20th century. And actually before that, if we think about the sugar industry already, since big sugarcane plantations were developed in the Caribbean and so on. So we're talking about a few hundred years ago, and the consumption of sugar increased. This became big business, not only in the 19th century, but in the 20th century and still today. So it was the sugar industry behind it. It was also the pharmaceutical industry, because all these diseases that we've seen rapidly increasing in the 20th century. I mean, if we just look at data for things like obesity, diabetes, and even heart disease, that was supposed to be addressed by putting guidelines in place, first of all by the American Congress, that told US citizens to cut back on fat and cholesterol. And then that was in 1980, and within 3 years, the UK adopted these dietary guidelines in 1983. You can go on the NHS website, and it's all there. The Eat Well plate tell you exactly what to eat, and you won't be surprised to find processed food and very high carbohydrate there. So this is actually then become institutionalized, within governments, and it was adopted, medical schools and so on. And this is now the dogma that we sat with or sitting with for the last 4 to 5 decades. And we just have to look at the statistics of chronic lifestyle diseases to see what's going on.
Yeah, we are living longer and supposedly the most technologically advanced, and yet we're the unhealthiest we've ever been. So there's something to be said about that, isn't there?
Well, I mean, do we want to live long, with a boost of medication that make us even feel sicker than we are? Or do we want to live healthy without all of these prop-ups that modern society use? Because people, I mean, I speak to many people, and very often when I ask people, how's their health and so on, I'm surprised about the answers that I get, like, oh, I'm completely healthy. There's nothing wrong with me. Oh, okay. Do you take any medication? Yeah, I'm on 7 different medications. And then they start rattling it off. And it's all for lifestyle diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of these things, statins. And people start thinking that it's completely normal.
Yeah.
As we get older, I mean, that's what I thought when I hit my 45, 40s, 50s, that going downhill. But luckily, we have modern medicine that can help us. And, that is a fallacy. That is not the truth, because the medication will suppress the symptoms, like the high blood pressure or the sugar spikes in diabetes, but it's not doing anything about the underlying disease. And we might think, I mean, we're talking now about people in their midlife or older, but it happens in younger people. We know that young children, teenagers and so on, are now becoming overweight, obese, diabetic. These things we were only thinking happened to people much older. But it depends on when you start eating the wrong food, because it takes time. It doesn't happen immediately. But if you're a baby and you're already exposed to a lot of processed food and sugar, it's going to happen if you hit your teens. But not only that. I mean, another thing that is hitting younger people, people in their reproductive years, is infertility. And it's not just women, it's men as well. It's sometimes the earliest symptom of, for men, for instance, of erectile dysfunction is the underlying metabolic health issues. And scientists now investigating this understand that, our metabolic health and our reproductive health are not two separate things. They are actually interlinked. So if your metabolic health underlying is dysfunctional, your reproductive health will also be dysfunctional. So we're not just talking to the older people, we're actually talking, across the board to everybody.
Which makes sense, doesn't it? Because, we are incredible creatures, but all of our systems are interrelated. So you can't be, spectacular in one and awful at another one. It makes sense that it's going to have an overlap.
Yeah.
So what can we do to improve our metabolic health?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think to understand what to do, I need to maybe understand one or two of the more scientific facts that's behind it. And I'm not going to make this complicated at all, because people really don't want to know all the intricate medical things. But what is important to know is, for our metabolism to work normally, there's one hormone that's dominant, and it actually is in charge of most other hormones. That, we've got hormones, enzymes, so many cellular processes that's going on. But this hormone's name is insulin. And insulin is the hormone that's secreted from our pancreas, and it's usually after we've eaten food. Mm-hmm. And it's necessary. Why is insulin necessary? Because it actually takes glucose. Glucose comes from sugar, or the breakdown products of carbohydrates, and it moves it into our cells to be used to produce energy, because we can't have any energy to power our body and our mind if there's not energy production in our cells. So our cells are like little factories that produce the energy. So that sounds all good. We need the glucose. There is a little problem, because it's not more is better. Because as soon as you go over a threshold in sugar level, and that usually happens when we eat a lot of carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates? Think of processed food. They're very high in sugar and carbohydrates. Things like bread, all processed, wheat products, cookies, biscuits, things like rice, but also certain vegetables are very high in carbohydrates. Let's think about root vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. If you follow a diet high in that, your glucose levels get too high for the body to really metabolize well. A different way to think about it, if we think about the total amount of sugar in our blood, so in a healthy adult male or female, if you measure it and equate that to it's 1 teaspoonful of sugar. Now that's not a lot. That's what keeps the body healthy. A little bit of sugar in the blood. But as soon as you increase that and it becomes too high, your insulin always respond to sugar levels. So if you eat more, your insulin goes higher, and it normally comes down. But all the food that we eat doesn't give rise to the same insulin levels. And this is a fact that not many people know. So the primary driver for insulin is carbohydrates or glucose. Mm-hmm. If you eat protein, it's much less. It's kind of a moderate response. And if you eat fat, there's almost no insulin response to that. Now, high insulin levels for long periods of time is very bad for us, because we get a disease, that underlying disease that's usually never diagnosed, called insulin resistance. And that means, for some reason, the insulin cannot facilitate glucose to get into our cells any longer to produce energy. So the result of that is that our cells become energy deficient, so it can't function normally. And this happens in tissues and so on, and that makes us develop diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So what diseases am I talking about? Low energy diseases. In general, in the body, for our muscles, if that happens, if there's insulin resistance in our muscles, we call it type 2 diabetes. If it happens in our ovaries, we call it polycystic ovary syndrome. That's the most common reason for young women to be infertile.
Yeah.
If it happens in our brain, we call it Alzheimer's dementia, but it's also called type 3 diabetes, or diabetes of the brain.
Wow.
It's a nutritional disease, and most people don't realize that. Heart disease. So we can go on and on and on. And the other thing that insulin levels do is any excess glucose that goes around, the body needs to take it out of the bloodstream because it's dangerous there. So it pushes it into our livers for storage, but our liver has got a very limited capacity. So as soon as the liver has reached its capacity, it goes and stores the extra glucose as fat.
Yeah.
And where do we find the fat? We find it in our abdominal area. So, this waistline expansion that so many of us experience as we go older, that's the fat. That means that your carbohydrate intake is too high. It's overwhelming the system, and it's making fat now. But it doesn't only go around the organs, it also goes into the organs. It also goes into the liver, the pancreas, all those organs, and it makes it sick. We've all heard of fatty liver disease. When we were medical students, we were taught that fatty liver disease is the reason. It's alcoholics usually that develop fatty liver disease. Well, it's no longer just alcoholics, because sugar and fructose that we get from fruit, as well as high corn fructose syrup that's produced and in processed food, is a primary driver for liver fat. So with all these things, so basically the very, very simple thing to say is what you put in your mouth is going to determine your metabolic health. I mean, it is as simple and as brutal as that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sitting here telling everybody that it's only food, but food is the basis. If you look at maybe the 3 or 4 most important things about metabolic health, the first thing and most important is the food that you eat. But we know there are also other things like exercise, very important. We know that sleep patterns are very important, and stress. Chronic stress is very bad for us. Little bits of stress now and then is fine. We can cope with that. Chronic stress is not good, because stress in itself can lead to insulin resistance and high sugar levels through the hormone cortisol. Now, I'm not going to make all these pathways, it's too much information, but I know some people like to know a little bit more. Now, let's just get back to exercise. Exercise is important. I mean, you know that yourself. But there's a lot of information about marathon athletes and so on. Very good examples. I don't know if you've heard of Professor Tim Noakes in Cape Town in South Africa, who's actually all his life been a sports fanatic, and he was a nutritional scientist at the University of Cape Town. And he did many, many marathons throughout his life. And after about 25 years, he developed type 2 diabetes. And he thought, what is going on? You know, he was the guy that wrote the book about carb loading for endurance athletes. You need to carb load, otherwise you'll not be able to complete the race. So that was his book. He's since torn up that book and said that was the wrong advice, because so many of the athletes got heavier and heavier because that's what they were doing, carb loading.
Yeah, that was common in the past, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so we know that exercise will not protect you from these diseases. And he actually coined the term, you cannot outrun a bad diet. It's going to catch up with you. Maybe not in the first 3 years, maybe not in the first 5 years, but it's going to catch up with you. And the only way to deal with that is to change what you eat. And that, and I started this chat with you to say that it's actually a message of hope. It is a message of hope, because even people that's already developed some of these secondary diseases like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on, can actually improve that. They can either reverse it completely, that is known, and there are many, many examples of that, or you can improve it so that you can decrease the amount of medication needed to support you.
Amazing. So by eating more insulin controlled diet, I guess, so high protein, low sugar, low carb. That's the suggestion.
I'll just add one more thing there: high fat.
High fat. Yeah.
Now, it's what is fat? It's healthy fat that I'm talking about, because there are a lot of bad fats. Now people will say, what's a bad fat? Easy, actually. The easiest definition I can give is any type of oil or fat that's made in a factory. So what are we talking about? We're talking about seed and vegetable oils.
Yeah.
Now, we were brought up, first of all, initially on margarine, because please just don't ever eat the butter, you know. Yeah. Margarine, and all these lovely spreads, you know, you can put it in the fridge, take it out, and you can just put it on your toast. No need to worry about the butter that you can't properly get on the toast as well. Yeah. And then all these convenient oils, the sunflower oil, the rapeseed oil, all these oils that we can now use to do our chips and, you know, all of these fries, everything. You can go to any restaurant. Most of them use one of these vegetable seed oils in their cooking.
Yeah.
And big business, huge business in that none of these seeds or vegetables were ever designed to be consumed, because it takes big industry to actually convert these products in something that looks like an oil, and has got all these properties, and it can last for months in your cupboard. Don't even worry about that.
Yeah.
So this all started actually already in the late 19th century in America. They started using some of these, like cottonseed and so on, to make soap. And then in the early 20s, companies like Cisco and so on discovered that they can actually utilize this for food. It's highly inflammatory. These oils are very high in omega-6. Omega-6 is a essential oil, but in high levels, it's very inflammatory. So we've seen, as with other processed food, enormous escalation in the consumption of these processed seed and vegetable oils. It's ubiquitous, you know.
Yeah.
Take any processed food and just look at the back, and you'll see, it's got some other polyunsaturated fat in it. The good polyunsaturated fat, though, is omega-3, because omega-3 is essential component of our cell structure and one of the most important components in our brain, of our neurons and the supported structures in the brain. So to develop a healthy brain and mind, omega-3 is one of the brain nutrients that we absolutely need.
Okay. And where would you get that naturally?
Where?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's marine life. Actually, cold water fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, that's very high in omega-3, but also in meat. If you can get grass-fed beef, much higher in omega-3. So it's natural food where omega-3 is high. So if you want to have a healthy brain and body, you need to make sure that you take in omega-3. Now, what about the plant-based alternatives, you ask?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Well, I think the thing is, one of the other things that we need to understand is it's fine to say, oh, you need to get zinc, you need to get iron, you need to get this and eat all of that. But it's not equal in all types of food. For instance, we call about bioavailability. It means the food that you eat need to have these micronutrients, which are the minerals and the vitamins, in the correct chemical structure for our body to absorb.
Yeah.
And a lot of the plant-based products don't have it in the bioavailable format. So we can think about all the fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in the optimal bioavailable format in plants, but they are optimal in animal-based foods.
Right.
The precursors of omega-3 in plants, in algae, are there. But the conversion to the bioavailable form in the body is not a very efficient process. It's about 1 to 5% of the intake will be converted to the correct format for our bodies to absorb. Now, we may ask, why is that? There are so many plants that we can utilize and eat and so on. Why would our body not want to access that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's due to evolution. We're talking about millions of years of evolution, where humans have evolved. I mean, from the lineage of gorillas and chimps, about 5 to 7 million years. Now, these gorillas and chimps, as we know, are mainly follow a plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
Chimps can be a bit omnivore, but they are predominantly plant-based animals. But humans deviated from that. And we have to try to explain how and why did humans develop a big brain? How and why are we walking on 2 legs and not on 4?
Yeah.
So there are many, some of these are philosophical questions because we don't have all the scientific explanation yet available, although it's also developing quite a lot. So something must have nurtured that brain to expand 3 times the size of a chimpanzee brain. And if we look at what are the brain nutrients, we can see that the nutrients like zinc, iron, the omega-3s, all of those, the protein, all of those are found predominantly in animal food. But this evolution, as I said, happened over millions of years. It's not something that we can reverse in a few decades to say, okay, we're all going vegan and vegetarian now, because we can't sustain our body with that. Even our gut anatomically is completely changed. If you compare the gut of a gorilla, a chimp, and a human gut, it's not the same anymore, because their gut is designed to absorb the nutrients from plant-based material. Mm-hmm. We can't do that anymore because we've lost certain functions and gained other functions. But this is really just for interest's sake, to understand that it's very complex, but there's very good reasons why we need to eat certain types of food, and it's unfortunately not up to the food and drink industry to tell us what is healthy, because there's a huge vested interest there. Of course, they're going to tell us what's healthy based on the products that they produce.
Yeah.
So
marketing, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we have to be, unfortunately, in today's world, cynical about, what is put out there as being healthy. And we have to stop and look around and say, is that really true?
Yeah.
Because I was
going to say, do you think there are more people now asking that question, or do you think the lion's share of people literally just kind of do what they're told and do whatever's on the cereal box?
I tell you what I think. I think the majority of people follow what they're told to do. Mm-hmm. They follow to do what their GP tells them, what the nutritionist tells them, or what's written on the cereal box. There's so many news articles, magazines, gurus, health gurus telling people what to do. People are confused because now they say, I'm not a scientist. Who do I believe? Yeah. Is it because this person looks nice? They look as if they've got an open face. They're not going to lie. How do people make decisions? And I came through, I also experienced this in the beginning, because I told you I wasn't really interested in nutrition. No. So one of the first things I read was to say that cholesterol is not the problem.
Yeah.
Cholesterol and fat's not the problem. Do you know what my reaction was? No. I immediately thought, this is a lot of nonsense. We've got some people here that really want to mess with everybody's mind. And I don't even want to go down that route because, I just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
For goodness sake, I'm a scientist. I've worked in scientific research. And then there was a little voice in the back of my head that said, if you are a scientist, why don't you read the science and make up your own mind? Really? Well, I'm so glad I did, because I then said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at the science. And not everybody's got the time or, to do that. But I can tell you I did. And I really started researching this. And what I discovered was that there is no verifiable scientific evidence to support the theories that fat and cholesterol gives us a heart attack. There's a lot of evidence to tell us that the culprits are really carbohydrates and sugar. And that's been out there for many, many decades. If you go back in history, one will see that how these big personalities sometimes, was able to talk louder and get into institutional support, especially in the US, from big companies and big research organizations. And we include the American Heart Association in this, and how it actually becomes quite dirty business, because these big companies even bribe scientists to publish data, and those have all been very well documented, as well as how much money the scientists got. It's still going on today.
Yeah.
And being a researcher myself, I know the only way that you can survive in the academic environment is that you need funding. So one's very careful to protect funders and access to funding and so on. Otherwise, there's no career for you in academia.
Yeah.
So
they can just look to prove their point. If they're funding it, we'll give you the money to look into cholesterol, as long as the answer is cholesterol's bad.
Well, I mean, you're not going to, if you get a big grant from whoever and your findings point to the exact opposite of what they want you, they're not going to allow you to publish it. And you're probably not yourself going to want to publish it, because that is goodbye to your funding.
Yeah.
So it's very uncomfortable for a researcher or ex-researcher and a person trying to work in that industry and think, you're towing the line, you're doing things for the good of humanity, to realize that what is going on and what has been going on for many, many decades is actually not that. That's a fallacy. It's very naive. And unfortunately, I fell into that category, to think that things are being done for the good of humanity. So it's a very long way of answering your question, that I think most people actually believe what they're being told.
Yeah.
But it's for people that become sick and they can feel themselves they're not getting better, but they take all these medication, they go back to the GP and they say, it's time to add something else. You're getting a bit sicker. Let's just keep it under control. Stop and think, what's going on here? What am I putting in my mouth other than the tablets that I'm swallowing every day? Because these diseases are not what they call druggable. They're foodable.
Yeah, with the right diet. I like that. Foodable, not druggable.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think the average American takes something like seven medications, don't they, or something like that, pharmaceuticals, by the time they're about 60.
Yeah, and I don't think people in this country is behind them at all.
Yeah, we're not.
The UK in Europe is now the country with the highest consumption of processed food. So they're just behind the States.
Wow. What's it like in South Africa?
I think it's not as high as here, but I think globally we see the escalation in consumption of processed food and drinks. Even in the darkest Africa, you can buy Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, almost all the processed foods are now ubiquitous. I mean, India, all those countries, we know the diabetes epidemic in India is just astronomical. We know that the UK and Japan has got the highest prevalence of dementia, of Alzheimer's dementia, globally. So, this is such a global driven force now, and the industry is so powerful because I think they even have arrangements with governments. Why can't governments ban processed food and drinks? I mean, they've tried to. They did in this country introduce a sugar tax, but then they wanted to increase that. That was rolled back. One should ask ourselves the question: why was that tax rolled back? What's happening there? Who's paying who? It's actually not for the benefit of the population. And this is, I think, why I like to come on podcasts like these and so on, to help spread the message, because the powers are enormous. We're trying to educate people, and I think we educating people one at a time, but people need to start to think for themselves. We've all been trained and believe these things. We lead busy lives. You don't have time to cook or prepare your own food. You just go to the store. There's all these products already designed, ready to grab. Spend your time on something more important than worry about these things. Well, it seems that actually that's the most important thing that we have to think about is our health, that of our children. What do we feed our children in the house? Because that's where they learn.
Yeah.
And sugar addiction is, I would say, one of the biggest problems that we have in today's society. It's a global problem. People don't understand what sugar is. It's not just the white thing, granules that you put in your tea and coffee. Everything, all carbohydrates break down to glucose.
Yeah. That's fascinating. You earlier on you said this was going to be a message of hope, but it sounds like it's the opposite. It sounds like it's pure despair from everything you said so far.
It's not, because if you can change it, you can stay hooked.
But most people don't want to, is what you said, because they're not thinking for themselves.
Yes, but it's a choice. Once you've heard the message and you think about your own life and you think how you feel, do you have brain fog? I didn't even know I had brain fog. It's only after I got rid of brain fog that I understood I had it. But you will know, are you on diabetes medication? Are you carrying extra weight that you can't get rid of?
Mm-hmm.
If you go on a diet, you're always hungry. Well, you're on the wrong kind of diet, Do you take high blood pressure medication? On and on we go. If you are one of those, if you suffer from infertility, you fit the bill. You need to think about what you need to eat. So you have a choice. But if you eat the correct food, if you eat the correct food, you can change it. So to me, that's an enormous message of hope.
Yeah, no, I like that. Just last week, actually, I was wearing one of the continuous glucose monitors on my arm. It was really interesting because I haven't had sugar for a long time, processed sugar. And I do enjoy a coffee in the morning, and I would put a little bit of honey in it. And the honey sent my sugar through the roof, and it would crash back off the other side. So I thought, I wonder what happens if I have, evil granulated sugar. So I had a tiny bit of sugar in my coffee, and not hardly anything happened. It was really interesting.
So people think honey is very healthy. It's extremely high in sugar.
Yeah,
now,
it's natural. It has to be good for me. I'll put some in my coffee.
What I also like coffee, so I also have coffee in the morning. But do you know what I put in my coffee?
No, but hopefully you're going to tell us.
Well, first of all, I do like dairy. And this is the other thing that we haven't spoken about. You need to have full cream dairy. Skimmed milk, semi-skimmed, any dairy products, throw it out. Because we need full cream, full fat dairy to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. So if you only use the low-fat or skimmed options, you can't absorb essential vitamins. So always either full-fat milk or double cream. Now, when I tell people have coffee with double cream, oh, is that allowed?
Yeah.
Let's try it. It's absolutely delicious.
I'm writing that down. That was brilliant.
You should. Yeah.
And then, do you ever put anything in yours to make it sweeter then, or just the dairy?
No, I mean, I used to want to have sweets all the time. I used to want to have desserts and so on. I didn't know I was sugar addicted, but as soon as you crave something or you want something, you're probably addicted.
Yeah.
And think about that. I'm just talking in general. Think about what you crave. What do you dream about? You know, I can tell you many desserts that I dream about or dreamt about. But when you start changing your diet and you start eating the correct food, those cravings go. As long as you don't give in to them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's always easy, because we know from alcoholism and so on, people smoking, some people can make a decision and that's the last day they use it. Some people it's more difficult. You have to know where on the spectrum you fall, but you need to know why you're giving something up so that you can work on that. And it's unfortunately, it's something that you need to do daily. But if you follow the correct nutrient-dense nutrition program, it will make it so much easier. I walk past the desserts, I go to restaurants, I don't look at the dessert menu, I don't crave it, and I also know the reason why I don't want to go down that road. So it is all of these things we can do something about, but we need to be honest with ourselves. If we can't look at ourselves and see who and what we are from a nutrition perspective, and it affects all functions of the brain and the body. If you can't be honest, you won't be able to solve the issue that you're dealing with, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Fantastic. So the message from today then overwhelmingly is obviously processed food is bad, but more than that, sugar in particular is what's driving a lot of these metabolic diseases and problems we've seen. We've lived through the era where fat was blamed for everything. Cholesterol causes heart attacks. Actually, cholesterol is the building blocks for many of our hormones and things we need. And actually, it's the sugar which is the issue. So if anyone's listening and they know they have a high sugar diet, now might be the time to try and cut that down or stop. Well, yeah, fantastic. Lots of great messages in there. If anyone is watching this and they want to reach out to you, how do they find you, Estrelita?
Yeah, we've got a website and they can contact us through the website. It's called Wellness EQ. So the name is www.wellnesseq.net. For people that you mentioned the books, for people that want to maybe read a little bit more, I'll just, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, that's great.
This book has got the basic science behind it, but it's not a very thick book. It takes a few hours to read.
A great title, Eat Well or Die Slowly.
Because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And then we also, I mentioned that we developed a program, nutrition program, which is online, available on the website. For people that want to access that, it's 3 months, and we teach people through recipes and so on how to cook and how to prepare food for themselves and their families. It's really not difficult. We've really made it easy and user-friendly to use, and you only need to go through that program once, and you will know exactly what to do, and you will have. There's over 80 recipes that you can utilize, and that's enough to give people experience on what to do. And then for people that really want to understand what their metabolic health status is, I've also developed a metabolic health assessment that people can book online. They will need a few laboratory test results for that, and they also need to complete a questionnaire. But based on that, we can make an assessment of what their risk status is, where their health, metabolic health, where it is on a from a good to not so good range, once you know that, you can actually use that as a basis. Then start following a healthy nutrition program. And within 3 months, if you do that, I can assure you that your metabolic, if you repeat the metabolic health assessment, you will see how your parameters have changed, which is great. Another message of hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can slow your metabolic aging by improving
Yes.
your diet. Yeah.
That's a very good way of putting it, because you do age slower, when your metabolism is functioning normally. I mean, obviously, we're not going to live for hundreds of years, neither do we want to, but you're going to be healthy, active, quality of life. That's what we talk about.
Yeah. Love that. Fantastic. So hopefully lots of people now are logging onto your website and getting in touch. There's so much fascinating information. I've enjoyed every minute. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Ross.